Welcome to Houston House at South by Southwest, presented by the Greater Houston Partnership. Building a tech unicorn. The journey to launching a successful company is never easy, but for most entrepreneurs, the reward is worth the risk. Mere ideas can become billion-dollar companies that disrupt industries, build new markets, create jobs, and drive innovation forward. From leveraging AI-based autonomous systems to help companies transform their finances, to fusing biology, chemistry, and technology to make the materials we need to sustain life on Earth, their incredible journey inspires others to dream big and take risks. Join Solugen founder and CEO as he shares insights on what it takes to build a billion-dollar startup in today's tech landscape.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to this Building a Tech Unicorn panel. I'm very happy to be here with Gaurav Chakrabarti. Just so everyone knows who he is, as I was writing his bio this morning, I was surprised that a human like him actually exists. It's pretty impressive. He's the co-founder and CEO of Solugen, a carbon-negative molecule factory that replaces petroleum-based products with plant-derived substitutes. He started the company in 2016 after completing his MD and PhD studies at UT Southwestern Medical School. He also has a degree in computational neuroscience from Brown. He's the author or co-author of 20-plus peer-reviewed journal articles and patents. He's also a Forbes 30 Under 30 honoree in industry and manufacturing. So we really look forward to this conversation with you, Gaurav. It's great to see such a packed house. Just so we know who's in the audience to tailor our conversation, how many of you are founders? Ooh. Whoop.
Go founders.
How many of you are investors? Everyone remember these hands. How many of you are students? Okay, great. And do we have any corporate folks? Okay, wonderful. So it's a really nice mix. So first question I have for you, Gaurav. In building your business Solugen, how much of the success do you attribute to the idea, how much to execution, and how much to luck? And do you have any insights on each of those elements?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks all for having me here today, and Payal for moderating. I think if I'm going to be blunt, and I think I'm allowed to in this stage, a lot of it is luck. A lot of people believe that the idea has to be this amazing, thing that's going to change the world, but that may not be true. I'm of the conviction that luck is a big part of it, but I have a very specific view on luck. It's not just, like you stumble onto something and everything's great. Luck takes a lot of work. So I would say that luck is a combination of those things that came before it. I have this hypothesis that there's a few other folks in the world that I think also agree with. It's this idea of a luck surface area. It's a strange idea, but have you seen that movie Interstellar?
I have not.
Yeah, okay, you should watch it. It's a ridiculously amazing movie. So there's this black hole. Everyone knows what a black hole is. It's like this energy-sucking thing that is in the middle of a universe. There was a planet near that black hole that had Earth habitable features to it, right? At least is what they thought. But in the movie, they said something very, very interesting that I think is a beautiful allegory for life. They said that planet would have been an Earth-like planet, but the black hole took all of the luckiness away from it for what it could have been. So what does that mean? That means that there are abilities, there are things that you can be doing to increase your luck surface area, right? To increase the chance that you will become, in this case, a habitable planet, because it was a series of very chance events. But those chance events were built on a lot of foundation. And so when I see that question, I think deeply in this premise that like you do make your own luck, but you have to be really putting in the work to do it. And there's a few principles I have for like how to increase your luck surface area. One of them is don't be near a black hole is a good one. And it sounds like a trivial thing to say, but black holes are those things or folks in your lives that tend to just say no, right? Say, hey, like there's no way that's going to work. You should kind of do something else. The dean, who I don't believe is here, of my medical school, literally said, when I told her I'm going to finish my MD, PhD and go start this company, she said, you're going to fail miserably. What are you doing with your life? That was a black hole, right? That was a black hole for me where I knew that if I had listened or let that energy kind of be taken from me, there would be no way that Solugen could exist. And so that's, I think, the number one rule is don't be near black holes.
I love that. And I also love that, I have this, when I counsel founders, I tell them sometimes when they hear no, like, haters gonna hate. Go find your people, go find your tribe, because there are hundreds of investors. You just gotta find the couple that match with you and get what you're building. So when you started Solugen, you had a co-founder named Sean.
Still have them.
Okay,
Yeah.
Wonderful. So how did you and Sean get others to believe in your vision and join your team full time when you were first starting this business and maybe cash strapped?
Oh man, it's still hard sometimes, right? Like I think the co-founder dynamic, let me first comment on that and then answer your second question. The co-founder dynamic is probably the most important thing. If you're a solo founder, maybe not as relevant, but if you have a co-founder, that is the thing that's going to make or break your company. It's not your idea, it's not your execution, it's that relationship with your founder. Sean and I have been best friends for 12 years now, and so our chemistry, we knew are each other's ticks, right? Like I knew what made him upset, I knew what made him excited, same thing with me. And we presented ourselves like that to potential employees. We wanted people to know that they're coming into something pretty authentic, right? This was not like, hey, we've got this great idea to make money, let's go make money. No, we had this conviction that we're building something that could be impactful for the world. And it came off, I think, very genuinely in our first employees who saw that and they said, man, I've never been somewhere where I've had the ability to do that. And so it was that level of passion that we were able to kind of, it's infectious, right? It's like we had this infectious level of excitement and passion. Even though like we didn't know what we're doing, we still don't know what we're doing, but like there's people that we're bringing along with us that they've never seen or been in a situation where they've been able to have that passion imbued upon them. And I think that's what continues to allow us to bring some of the best talents that we have.
Has your business relationship with Sean ever gotten in the way of your friendship?
Almost, a couple times, yeah. I think the thing is with me and Sean, we fight a lot. Like not like fisticuffs. No, we debate a lot, and it's always about the idea. It's never ever about us as people, and I think that's what allowed us to keep going when there were really rough times, like really really rough times for us. And I think what allowed us to keep going was this ability to know that like we are each other's intellectual ping pong partners, where it's like I'll put something out there, he'll be like, that's kind of dumb, and I'll be like, bam, backhand. And it's kind of, like we go back and forth with this idea, and eventually you build something that's so cool that you didn't think you could do it on your own. Yeah.
It seems like y'all are very complementary and intellectually each other's equals. So how do you split responsibilities? Are you on the business side and he's on the tech side?
Yeah, I think we've got some employees here, so I think we're still figuring it out. But largely, I handle a lot of like the commercial. It is really important to have very clear roles and responsibilities, because I think when decisions have to be made, people need to know where to go to. That's the fundamental thing we've learned, is that if there's any confusion on how decisions are made, the decision will not get made, or it'll be pushed to the side. And so what we were pretty intentional early on was saying, hey, like anything that has to do with engineering or scaling up, Sean, that's your world. Anything that has to do with raising money, selling products, or dealing with customers, that's my world. And obviously there's overlap in the two, but that designation that we made actually made a lot of sense for our skill sets. Yeah.
Yeah, well, wonderful. Maybe just drilling down into things that are in your purview, such as commercial activities. So tell us about getting your first customer and how that differed from getting your 100th customer, and which was harder.
Oh man, okay. I'm gonna tell a story. All right, so when we started the business, we didn't know anything about the startup world, right? We didn't know what Y Combinator was. We didn't know any of that stuff. So in our minds, we thought we just had to be cash flowing. That was the only thing that we thought. And so we won this competition at MIT. We didn't win. We got second place at this competition at MIT called the 100K competition, and they gave us $10,000, which is not a lot of money to build a chemical empire, to be frank. Yeah, it was not a lot of money. So what we did, was just finishing my MD degree in Dallas, and for like $400 a month, we found this little lab space where we could do some experiments. And we ended up going to Home Depot. We bought a PVC pipe, and I expressed some enzymes in E. coli. We put it in this little reactor, and it started making our product, right? And
in your house?
It was in a lab.
Okay.
Yeah. No, my wife, is and still is my wife, but she wouldn't let me do that at the time. But basically, like, this notion was really cool for us. 'Cause it was like, wow, we're like making stuff, right? This is so cool. Like, we're actually making stuff. And then we sat there and we're like, what are we gonna do with this stuff? Like, we're just gonna sit on this? So what we ended up doing, I looked at all of the possible applications for at the time it was hydrogen peroxide is what we were making. Looked at every single use case for like every single one. I still have the Excel sheet. It was like all the way from like semiconductor grade peroxide, all the way down to like using like peroxide for like flower, helping flowers grow. It was like, we looked at the whole entire spectrum, and we mapped it onto like what are all of the dollar per gallon, like the actual price that customers are willing to pay. And then there was a third column, and that third column was which customers are accessible to us, right? Semiconductor customers were not accessible to two guys in a PVC pipe. That's just not the way that market works. So we kept going down the list, and literally it was me picking up the phone, calling every single customer that I could under each bucket. This was hundreds of people. Finally, we hit upon the most obscure market in the world. We found this thing. Have you heard of isolation tanks or float tanks?
Yes.
Yeah, it's like where you put like a bunch of salt in this water and you float in it and you close the lid over you. It's a terrifying thing. I don't know why people do it. But what we discovered was that they actually use peroxide, right? They use peroxide to clean the water because people are laying there naked and you want to make sure there's no bacteria growing. It makes perfect sense. What we also discovered was the price that they were paying for that peroxide was 10x more than any of the other markets that we saw. So in our heads, we were like, well, heck, we can actually make a profit on this because, yes, we're at a PVC pipe scale. There's no way we're going to compete in the semiconductor market, but we can own the float spa market. And that's exactly what we did. So our first customers, it was literally me going to the float spa and saying, hey, I know you guys use peroxide. Would you guys want to use bioperoxide? That was our brand. We were marketing geniuses, bioperoxide. And so we said, would you want to use bioperoxide? And they're like, well, what's that? And that's when I learned about value selling, right? We're talking about, well, like right now you use peroxide that comes from natural gas. What if it came from, plant sugars, blah, blah, blah. And these are the benefits that you can have. The impurity profile is different, and it's, more natural. And when people are laying there naked, like that's like, there's a lot of these things that we were able to sell. And the first customer was in Dallas. She was like, I'll buy it from you, but you have to go on my podcast. And I was like, okay, I'll go on any podcast you want me to.
What kind of podcast was this?
It was called Love Language or something like that. It was super weird. Whatever, I didn't care. So I was like, yeah, I'll do the podcast. And she was our first customer. And she bought it was a small order. It was like $200, but at the time it was like it was memorialized, right? Like this was the biggest thing in the world for us because it had just validated all of the work we had just done with one customer. And then what we did was we realized that there's a bunch of these float spas around Texas and really all over the United States. And so I went one by one, called every single float spa up. It was about 80 customers, but these are like small markets, right? by the end of it, we knew the pitch cold, right? I can get someone to buy our product within 30 seconds just because I'd called every single customer. I knew what their pain points were. I knew what kind of, depending on where they were in the United States, I knew what kind of things to say. And so by that point, by the 100th customer, it was like clockwork. Like we ended up owning 80% of the float spa market, which is like awesome, I guess. But that taught us like, wow, there's like something here, right? Like people care about something that we're making. And what we ended up doing, we had just learned about this program called Y Combinator at the time. And Sean was like, we got to put an application in. I was like, dude, this seems weird. Like you spend 3 months in some place and work on a company. I've never heard of such a concept. And so we applied, we got in, and that's when we realized like what we were doing was precisely the playbook that Y Combinator recommends, which is find your niche market or whatever it is that allows you to, I think they call it like ramen profitability or whatever, but like allows you to actually justify that your technology, your product, whatever it is, has a customer base associated with it on the other side. And that was our first and our 100th customer story, yeah.
So in my day job, I meet a ton of founders, and I had not heard this story, but you, I believe, were born to be an entrepreneur because everything we teach all of my portfolio companies, looking at all the, potential use cases, finding your beachhead market, picking up the phone and actually making the first 100 calls. I love that you did that.
Yeah, I think every founder like has to be. I even to this day, like we're 6.5 years into Soluagent, and I still. Every day, I will ask either my team to give me an update on what the customers are doing, or I will go out and meet a customer and figure out if we're actually providing them something that they want. I think if you try to outsource that part because you're a quote-unquote technologist, it's unlikely the company will succeed. I think every founder has to be able to go out there and talk to all spectrum of customers, small and big.
And are you from Houston originally?
Yes. So I was born in India. I grew up in India, but then we moved to Houston, Texas, because my dad was a chemical engineer. My dad's also like a hustler. He started his own. That's probably where I got it from. But basically, we started out in Houston. We were quite poor because Dad couldn't get a job because his English wasn't that good, and so we lived in like this really podunk part of town in Houston called Fondren. I'm sure it's like.
I'm familiar with Fondren Road, but that's a kind of a long north-south road.
It's an area called Moneta. Anyway, long story short, he ended up figuring out a way to like get out of there because he got a job at Exxon, and the rest is history. But our first plant is actually in Moneta. People don't realize that. And so it's like literally half a mile away from the apartment that I grew up in, is the world's first carbon negative chemicals plant in the middle of what looks like a fifth ward. But that's like the whole point, right? Like what if you could build these plants in neighborhoods that have traditionally been on the downstream of chemical companies, right? They don't care about these neighborhoods. But if we can come in and actually go into these neighborhoods, and Houston's a great place for that because zoning laws don't exist, we can go in and build these plants in areas where people have traditionally been a second thought to big industry. But now we're hiring people from that area to actually run our plants. That's like, I think the future of business is like, how do we actually make money and employ people who are traditionally on the receiving end of something bad when a chemical plant explodes?
I wonder if I love that story and the tie to the neighborhood that you grew up in. So you've spent most of your life in Houston, some time in the Northeast, and then participated in YC. What was your experience in Silicon Valley? What was that like? What did you learn?
I didn't like it. Frankly, it was just a lot of noise. No offense to Silicon Valley folks here. And I'm friends with like a lot of them, obviously, but like it was just a lot of noise because everyone was trying to figure out what's the next big thing, right? Like, oh, is this like the next big thing? There was no like real understanding of the current thing and like what made that current thing good or bad. And so for us, 3 months was all we can do. So we did the YC 3 months, and then we were like, I can't handle this. This is not the type of business we want to build. We moved back to Houston, and it's just been we're just insulated from a lot of noise, I would say. Yeah.
And did you start fundraising when you were in the Bay Area?
Yes. So most of our money does come from the Bay Area as well, so I can't speak too poorly about it. But the reality is that's where we got started, right? Because of YC, it's mainly Bay Area VCs that funded us up until Series B. But then starting in Series C, we had hit a scale as a business where institutional capital could start, and that's where real big checks come in. So sovereign wealth funds, the BlackRocks of the world, Blackstones, they're all investors. But it took that first Series A, Series B time where we raised venture to get us to that point.
So according to Crunchbase, Solugen has raised $635 million from marquee investors, including Lower Carbon Capital, Temasek, and BlackRock. So what are your fundraising secrets? Because I think you're good at fundraising.
Yeah, I think it's the same thing with customers, right? Like, I think I view anytime someone is taking a check out and giving you money, there must be a reason that they're giving you money, right? So in the customer world, it's quite simple. I am creating value that is disproportionately something they don't want to do. No one wants to go make peroxide if they run a float spa, right? This is not something people do. Same thing with venture capitalists, right? If they see an opportunity where they can say, hey, I can have an asymmetric return on this money, why would I go build this myself? So the way I view fundraising is I want to convince the investor that if all else were equal and their lives were different, this is the company they would be building. If I can convince them that, like, wow, like if I did the technical stuff that Gaurav and Sean did, I would build this company. And that was my proxy for a successful fundraise. Whenever I was able to get an investor to see that they either wanted to join the team, which has happened, or they want to figure out how to make more Solugens. That's when you know the thing worked. And part of the fundraising narrative is, I have a really simple framework. It's just a 4-phase framework where it's like, phase 1 is like, what can you do today? Phase 1 was our float spa. Not big, not exciting, but it shows that something is real. There's something here that customers are willing to take their wallet out and pay for. Phase 2 is, how does that look bigger in your eyes? Like, is there a world where you graduate out of float spas? And the answer is yes. We started getting into agriculture and wastewater, really big volume markets. Phase 3 is, well, is it a platform? So meaning, can you guys make things other than peroxide? And that's exactly what we did in phase 3. We started making acid products. And phase 4 is kind of like, this is what the call option is, right? Like, this is what the future could look like if Solugen is successful. There's a plant on every single corner that looks amazing and is carbon negative. That's the future that I'm selling, but it is a completely incredible future if I do not have phase 1s through 3 in execution. So when we raised our Series A, we had proven out phase 1, that there was this early beachhead market, and we were able to very compellingly tell the teams that were trying to invest in us how phase 2 was going to come to fruition and what that looks like from a return profile. And so the way we pitched it was like every single phase, it gives you like a stopgap where it's like, okay, if all else fails, at least I'm here. And then when you get to phase 3, if all else fails, at least I'm here. And each of those phases were succeedingly bigger businesses, right? Phase 1 was a tiny business. Phase 2 was maybe a few $100 million business. Phase 3, where we're at today, that's a couple, probably 10 to $15 billion business that we're building. And in phase 4, I think is legitimately there's a $100 billion to $200 billion business for us. Right now we're at phase 3, and the next fundraising round, it could be like a pre-IPO round or IPO round. We'll see what the future looks like. Yeah.
I think one thing you're very good at is painting the possibility or the opportunity to investors. So I can see how you got all those checks. I'm curious, what were the sticking points in the negotiations with all these investors?
So I remember we got a term sheet for our Series A from A16Z. We got I don't know how we got so lucky. We got A16Z, Benchmark, Founders Fund, all these really marquee venture names. And we were leaning towards going with Andreessen, and I love that team a lot. But there was this conversation we had where Ben and Mark took me and Sean out to dinner, and they're like, guys, you're gonna have to move out of Houston and move into San Francisco. That was literally they're like that. If you guys want this term sheet, you have to move into the Bay Area. And Sean and I literally right there, we looked at each other and we were just like, we're not gonna do that. And We didn't take A16Z. And so that was like one sticking point where it's like, I really, really like that team, but there's no way our business could succeed in a place like the Bay Area. It does not compute for our type of business. The other sticking points were more about understanding the market opportunity, because I think whenever anyone thinks of the chemicals industry, they know it's big, but like they don't realize how big, right? They think, oh yeah, it's like $1 trillion industry. What people don't appreciate is it's $1 trillion industry that underpins another $10 trillion of value, probably more than 10 trillion of value. And so when you start saying, if phase 4 were to happen, there is a world where Solugen starts integrating into the downstream things that make chemicals possible. That's a pretty big opportunity. People missed that. People didn't see that same vision that we did, that if you solve chemicals, in my opinion, and this is gonna sound crazy, but like, if we solve chemicals and materials, we can solve housing and we can solve cities. And that sounds like completely wild to say, but that's how big we're thinking the chemicals industry is. It underpins the fundamental value of most everything that we touch in society. A lot of people disagree with that. That like, there's no way that this company that has a PVC reactor is gonna be making, clean cities of the future. But the reality is, maybe we are. Maybe that's exactly what we're doing.
Yeah, and so that's a very interesting anecdote that, a very well-known investor wanted you to move to the Bay Area, but you knew in your gut you needed to be, in a city that where the industry already was, you could hire the talent and the know-how and the supply chain was around you, and you could build the future you wanted.
Yeah, we call it like city company fit. So it's like, for our business, if you look at the density of chemical engineers, the density of our potential customers, and the density of people who know how to do enzyme engineering, Houston happened to be that perfect trifecta for us. That's what I mean by city company fit. There's a lot of companies that would probably thrive if they were in the right city, but they're not. Obviously, software has democratized a lot of this, so maybe it's different, but I would argue that even in software, there's a city company fit that you have to be very cognizant of.
And just me chiming in on my little soapbox as well, Bobby Tudor talks a lot about it in Houston, about the clean tech 1.0 phase in the late 2000s, early 2010s, and there was this whole biofuel revolution on the West Coast. What people don't understand is West Coast VCs don't have the appetite or balance sheet to make those big investments and be very patient. That's why I believe Houston will be the energy 2.0 capital of the world, because we have this large industry there that knows how to build big projects. They hire tons of engineers and have the know-how, and they have the balance sheets to finance this. So that's just my 2 cents. I had to chime in. So I heard that you're married to a investor, a VC here in Houston. So I found that super interesting.
She's technically in Austin, but she lives with me in Houston because she's my wife and likes me. She's right there.
Oh, there you are. So has being married to her affected how you think about growing and financing your business? And vice versa, has your experience influenced her and how she works with founders and invests in them?
Yeah, I absolutely. I think for the first question, it's just nice having someone who is gonna call your bullshit, I guess you can say. Where it's like there's a lot of people that they're incentivized to agree with us, right? They work for us, so they're not going to disagree, which is fine. I get it. That's just the incentive structure of businesses. But my wife is a bit different than that. She's a venture capitalist who looks at things very objectively with an unemotional lens, right? Like there is a reality that my job is to return money to my investors. That is my first job for my board. And she keeps kind of me honest on like, what are those things that are gonna do that are high value activities, and what are the things that are clearly not, they're just kind of like side things that I find interesting and I get excited by. Those aren't gonna drive value. So there's a level of focus and intensity that she drives in me that if I were, honestly, if it was up to me, I'd just be like hanging out somewhere. But she keeps that honest. And I think on the flip side, being married to a founder, I don't want to speak for her, but I do think it gives you a lot of empathy to the journey that a founder makes, where we It wasn't good. The good times. It was rough times in the beginning. Like me and Sean would sleep on the floor of a warehouse for 6 months at a time. It was really, really rough. And I know there's a lot of founders who like have gone through that, but VCs don't know that. They don't see that part of the story. They don't see when, you know, we were almost out of cash balances and we had to stop taking any salary just so the company could survive. But she saw that. And I think that is the level of empathy that it's amazing for venture capitalists to see, that this isn't just, yes, I get it, I have to return capital, I get that, but it's also like my life's work, and having that be shown from a venture capitalist side, it's kind of refreshing. Yeah.
That story really resonates with me. About 6 months ago, I was having coffee with one of my portfolio companies, and the founder, you know, when time was up, he was like, oh, I got to go to the food bank to pick up groceries. And just, I hadn't thought that he would be buying groceries from the food bank, and it just, you know, hit me. And
this is not a glamorous job. As much as people romanticize entrepreneurship, it sucks. It's I don't know why he would do this.
Yeah, so for all the investors in the room, I think, you know, having those real stories with the founders you work with, it'll build the empathy for sure. So I'm curious, I was talking to a few of the guests in the front row before our talk, and they were wanting to hear the real story, and you seem to be very authentic. So tell us about some of the pivots you've had to make while running Solugen.
All right, a lot. The biggest one, all right, I don't know if many people know this. It's history, not sure why you would. But so after Float Spas, we were trying to figure out, well, what's the next big market for us, right? What's that phase 2? And obviously I'm sitting here telling you like, it's wastewater, it's agriculture, the big things that people know about. That is not what we thought at first. We actually launched a consumer cleaning brand after we had the Float Spa success. It got to our heads, that success, you know? We thought we could take on any market, and so we said, well, we did the same exercise. Okay, what are the different markets we can go in? What's the dollar per gallon? How easily accessible are these markets to us? And the thing that popped up was a direct-to-consumer cleaning brand. And so it wasn't just a cleaning brand, it was a wipes brand. It was called Ode to Clean. Our marketing slogan was everybody wipes. That was when we fired Sean from the marketing department. But basically, it was like we made this product, and we were like, well, how can we extract the most money, like profit from this chemistry? And we decided to create a whole brand around it. So Ode to Clean, it was this beautifully designed like box that sits in your table, and you open it, and then like a peroxide wipe comes out. I'm not joking. This is what we did. You could look this up. And we were all in. There was nothing else for us. At that point, we were like, this is the company. Everyone laughed at us. We laughed at ourselves, right? Because we're also like, we enjoy making fun of ourselves, but like, there was just some like reality to our mentality where we're like, this is it. This is as far as this company is gonna go, and we have to make this work. That was our mentality. It was like, there's nothing else. We're gonna make this work. And I was on mommy blogs. I was on Facebook groups with a bunch of moms, like promoting like the benefits of, and I believed in it, right? Like I actually believed that this was a better product. And all of our early investors, they thought we were batshit. Like they were like, what are you doing? You guys are like two super technical guys trying to sell to like mommy influencers. So we kind of listened in 1 year, appreciated it, but then put it out the other year because they didn't know our business. They didn't know how hard it is to scale up a technology or how much money it takes. So we would rather be in a state of profitability before we go out again for fundraising. And the really exciting thing was we launched in October 2018. We sold out all of our inventory, all of it. This was like $1 million of inventory, sold it out in the span of a week. People loved this stuff. They like loved these like little wipes that we had. It was wild, and we had no like marketing experience. I was running our Facebook ads. Me and Sean were doing like logistics and fulfilling of the packages and stuff. It was 3 of us at that point. We had hired 1 person, and it was just crazy. We've never seen like people wanting a product like that before, and so then our investors were like, "Oh, well, this is interesting. It's a cash flow." Like they started to come around to like what this could look like if this is all the company was. But Sean and I were just convinced, like, this is our company. Like, there is a future that we can sell, but that future is not here today. This is the company right now. But again, this is where luck comes in. We got a super lucky break. So within 3 months of that launch, business was going, fairly well for us. What ended up happening was we got 3 acquisition offers from 3 different brands for Eau de Clean. The first was a company called Harry's. It's like the shaving company. They were trying to expand out across shaving, and they thought like cleaning products were the next big thing. And they really liked our branding, which was hilarious because it was just me and Sean. They really liked the branding and like the product story and everything like that. And so they gave us a term sheet to acquire the brand. And when we got that term sheet, it was everything changed for us. That term sheet catalyzed a lot of different downstream things. So one, it catalyzed a competition for other brands to buy us out. And what we were able to negotiate was, in this term sheet, we want a provision in there where if they buy us out, they have to agree to a 3-year supply contract for the chemistry, like at volume, which is like, if we had tried to do that with a P&G on day one, they would have laughed us out of the room. We basically hacked 3 years of business development in 3 months by launching this brand. That's not what we intended, but it's what happened. So that was number one. The second thing that happened was we started talking to investors about all these term sheets we were getting for the brand, and then the Series A term sheets started coming in. People were like, whoa, like these guys know how to execute something. Let's see what they can do with more money. And then the third thing was we started getting credibility in our like the cleaning space, which is like P&G's, Unilever's, those types of guys, because they were like, wow, this is a brand I see everywhere. I remember the CEO of Wegmans, which is like it's a grocery store. He calls me up and he's like, I see your brand everywhere. And really what we had done is we just targeted him on like Facebook and LinkedIn. I learned like how like retargeting worked at that point. And basically everywhere he went on the internet, he saw Eau de Clean, Eau de Clean, Eau de Clean. And so he just called me up and he's like, what is this thing? Like, how did you guys get so big so quickly? And I was like, we're not big. We just learned how to market really much better than any of the other guys would do it. And like, so what ended up happening, how did we end up deciding on who to get acquired by? We made a set of LinkedIn ads that linked to like this Forbes article or something that was talking about the brand. And we targeted that ad to every single CEO and M&A person at the big consumer-focused companies. And when we did that, we had 3 offers in total for acquisition. We ended up selling to the world's biggest wipes manufacturer, which is actually a private label brand. But it ended up being probably one of the most lucrative, just on a percentage profit-wise, one of the most lucrative deals that we did as a company. And that was all because it was a pivot, right? It was a pivot from, hey, let's own float spas to, hey, let's own wipes. But it ended up being that wipes thing, without us realizing it, it told the market more about us as a company than anything else. What it taught the market was Solugen is a company that is like gonna survive no matter what. Like we are going to like fight tooth and nail and make this thing successful in one way or another. And we're a team that can execute on that. We don't just talk. We actually put in the work. I do remember like taking a course on Facebook marketing, and this was like after I did my like MD PhD. My parents were like, "What the hell are you doing?" Right? I was like, "Well, this is what you had to do." Like we were willing to give up all of our ego and pride just to make sure the thing that we thought was going to be successful was going to be successful. And so we gave it our all. And I think that pivot was the most important pivot, one of the most important pivots in the company's history that accelerated our trajectory probably 4 or 5 years.
And am I right in assuming that because you sold it to this wipes brand, that 3 years of revenue funded your B2B side?
Yeah, so it was a brand acquisition, which is awesome because it's literally just like giving someone like some JPEGs and stuff, and it was like infinite profit for us. But then the reality was it gave us predictable revenue for 3 years from a really big customer that we could then take to any VC and be like, look, we've de-risked the commercial side of the business. Let's figure out how to make these faster.
Wonderful. So I'm going to ask you one more question, and then I'll open it up to Q&A from the audience, which we'll take from that mic in case y'all want to start lining up. So I'm curious, now as a CEO, how do you spend your time as a unicorn founder. And I'm also curious, you have big customers and a board and lots of people that have given you a lot of money. Like, how do you manage your board?
Yeah, I think, so I've made a lot of mistakes in our journey, and I promise you I'll make more. It's a given. One of the mistakes I made, I think early on around Series B financing was I kind of let go of the reins a little bit. I started, there's like this management mantra where it's like, oh, you hire the best people and you get out of their way. That is not good advice for the type of business we were building. We're building a business that is vertically integrated from technology to the customer. You have to be, it's not micromanagement and it's not macromanagement. I call it like meso management. It's like in between where like you have to be on top of the details. You have to. And so I let go of that like after our Series B and things slowed down a little bit. And I was told that like, oh, this is great, you're building process, blah, blah, blah. But process for the sake of process was stupid. And that's when I realized like I made a huge mistake here. And so I basically jumped right back into the saddle. And this was like after Series C now, like we had raised 500 million bucks at this point. So it was a big operation. And it was hard. I had to jump in and be like, no, like we're gonna do things this way. And it wasn't, a lot of people resented me for that. And a lot of people left because they're like, hey, like, what's going on? What's this whiplash? But like, you can never ever lose that pulse on the business or else you start becoming mediocre. And so that's what I learned a bit too late from the Series C, but we recovered from it quite well because I was able to really dive in there, and only founders really understand the real pain points of the business. Like, because it's emotionally tied to you, you actually feel it. No hired COO or CCO is going to understand like when a customer churns, like how painful that feels. You have to feel that yourself and know what to do. And so that's how I operate the business. Meso management, not micromanagement, not macro, but right in the middle.
You should trademark that or put that on Urban Dictionary.
And then the second thing with the board, it's kind of the same thing. I've gotten into a lot of debates. I can be prickly sometimes because I know what the company needs. No board member or investor is gonna know what your company needs. Only you and your founder know that. That is like fundamentally, however big you are. Amazon has done an amazing job of this, where Bezos has just known what the customer wants every single step of the way. The companies that you have founders stepping back, and not to talk poorly of Google, but like when Larry and Sergey stepped back, yeah, things look great, but now they're in a precarious position because the whole AI revolution is probably going to take over Google. Well, maybe, I'm sure people disagree, but like the whole idea is that like with the board, I did micromanage. So I didn't meso-manage or macro-manage. I micromanaged the board, meaning I say exactly what we want. I disagree to them about things they think we should have because I think it's not smart. And we basically tell them what we want from them. You have to tell your board, they are part of the company, and your job as CEO, they work for you. I know they gave you money and they have oversight over you, but it's still you running the show, and you have to tell your board what the company needs and be unequivocally certain that that's what the company needs. Otherwise, you're going to get run over by a bunch of different opinions.
And I believe, especially for a type of business like you have built, a revolutionary or new technology with investors who write big checks and don't know how to take something from small to big.
Yeah, I would say like, especially knowing, like I'm a technologist at the end of the day, so like knowing the technology and knowing like what it's capable of and what its limits are, it's an unfair advantage. It's such an unfair advantage. Like no investor will ever be able to out-talk me in the details of our technology, and because of that, I know exactly what the roadmap should be for. Obviously, I could be wrong, and I have been wrong before, but like at least I have that conviction because I understand the technology. But if I am wrong, I know why I'm wrong, and I can learn from that and course correct very rapidly. There's like, we have this concept called microevolutions at Solution, which is like, you going from A to B, success is not a straight line. It's going to be a bunch of zigzags, and we just have to be okay with that. And I just need a team that understands that we're going to go the wrong direction sometimes, but it doesn't mean we're not going to course correct.
Well, wonderful. So I want to open it up to the audience. Anyone have any questions?
Right. So I assume I have the mic, so I can ask the question.
Yes. Speak up just
a
little bit.
Can you hear me? Okay. So, first of all, congratulations on building the company and the technology. At this point in your journey, what are the top 3 challenges that you see?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there's actually, I actually have this on a whiteboard written, because I ask myself that question once a quarter. What are we call them grand challenges at Cellugen. So I just sit down for like a couple of hours every quarter and I say, what are the 3 grand challenges of the business? Meaning, if we solve these 3 things, we unlock some next level of growth. Those 3 things for me are making sure we're executing and scaling commercially. Meaning, yeah, we've done it a couple of times, but if we get lazy now on how this thing's gonna scale, that's when disaster is gonna strike. So we have to be like, execution is number 1 on the commercial side. 2 is making sure that there's cohesion among the team. I don't think I'm a very good manager. I'll be the first to say it, but now I'm starting to realize that like the way that the team, the cohesiveness of the team at this scale, how they operate actually can determine the difference between failure and success. If you think of a rocket, if there's even a little bit of misalignment and the rocket's going to the sun, 1 degree misalignment will set you off 1.2 million miles. That's basically the story of Cellugen, right? If we're off even a few degrees on our alignment, we're going to be off very quickly from one another. And so 2 is the alignment. And the third part is hiring the best talent possible, which sounds like a truism. But what I mean by that is the best talent for Cellugen. Just because someone's like, oh, I was CEO of P&G, therefore I'm going to do great things at Cellugen. It's not how it works. Our culture is very specific. There's a very specific type of people that succeed here. And those are the people I need to figure out how to find. And those are the 3 big challenges for me. Yeah.
Thank you for your talk. My name is Alexi. I own a small clothing company. My question is, are there traits in early employees that you look for that differ from later stage employees? And you kind of talked about that.
Yeah. I think, again, it comes back to like, I think a general truism that I would say here is, if you start thinking about your culture as a business, your culture should be polarizing. It should actually like turn some people off. Because if you're not polarizing some people, it's not a culture. It's a free-for-all. Like what we want is to make sure the early employees are those employees that get mad at the same things I do, right? Inefficiencies, unclear thought. Like these things need to be memorialized. And even if it's the 300th hire or whatever we're on, it's that hire is going to have the same qualities as that early employee. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Pamela Villarreal. I'm the co-founder of Otif. It's a technology company focused on logistics. And I have a question. You said that you started your fundraising journey when you entered YC. So do you think if you haven't entered YC, would it have changed like the way that you raise funds? Would you recommend it? Would you have done it any other way?
No, I wouldn't have done it any other way. I think, I don't know what YC's reputation is nowadays, but like when we were there, it was, for investors, it was the best place to be. I would say if we didn't do YC, we probably would have lost 2.5 years, I'd say, of company speed, velocity. It wouldn't have been like terrible. We would have gotten to the same goal, but I think it kind of sped things up for us. Yeah.
So I come from the software world, and my understanding of other kinds of businesses is that different industries need higher levels of prototyping and minimum viable products, like bigger investments. You know, for a physical business with physical products like chemicals or energy, you know, what's your recommendation to entrepreneurs and tips that you have for building products that are like more capital intensive and require more research?
Yeah, I think it comes back to the customer segmentation. That I found that's like the secret sauce to fast product launches, is to really understand the customers that you're going after and what the tolerances of those different customer groups are to different spec of products. So like for us, the spec, and by spec I mean like how pure is the product. Like for semiconductor, we needed like absolute 1 part per trillion impurity. There's no way some dudes in a lab behind Love Field Airport are going to be able to do that, right? So what we did was we found the customer that was willing to accept the flaws in the product for some bigger purpose. And so that's where every single product we launch, we have this core value called Think Big, Act Now. Think Big is like, who is that, you know, mega customer that we want one day? Act Now is like, who's that customer that believes in this so much that they're willing to be okay with a couple of issues here and there just to see this thing through. And being able to identify, I think the secret of the best founders are the founders that can identify who those customers are quickly and who those aren't, are the ones who end up being the most successful. Airbnb, like Brian's a good mentor of mine. He's a phenomenal eye for this. He has a phenomenal eye for understanding which customers or which investors are willing to take the bet and which aren't, so he's not wasting his time on the long tail that's going to take years to close.
Thank you.
Hi, Gaurav. Thanks for being here, and thanks, Payal, for great moderation. My name's Tobias. I'm a high school student from Montreal.
I got your email.
Yeah. Well, I actually flew in to come meet you.
Oh, wow.
And so I'm working on a renewable diesel project with cyanobacteria to make fatty acids. And I was wondering, in a space like chemicals, and let's say for fuels as well, I've listened to many of your podcasts, and I was wondering how much of the success of the business depends on the improvement of cost versus the increased ease of use of your delivery with distributed biomanufacturing.
Yeah, phenomenal question. So basically what Tobias is getting at is there's two kind of almost competing ideas in this world. One is, hey, does the technology produce the product at the spec and whatever that you want? And two is, how do you deliver that product to the customer in the most efficient way? What we discovered pretty early on was again, it goes back to, I know I sound like a broken record, but it's all about customer segmentation. The market that we went after was a market that no one wanted to touch and still doesn't really want to touch. But what we discovered was you can move a lot faster if you build these facilities closer to the customer. So we've got a facility in West Texas that supports the energy industry. We're building another facility in the Midwest that supports the agriculture industry. The tolerance for off-spec product is actually much higher if there's supply chain stability. Again, it's not every market, but it's understanding which customers allow you to have this type of breakthrough on the product purity requirements. So I don't know enough about the fuels market. My hunch is there's probably not many markets that can take an unrefined type of fuel, but I could be wrong. Yeah.
So for chemicals, like you're saying, it's dependent on which type of customer. For some people, it's more important than others.
100%, 100%.
Thank you.
You're a very consumer, customer-focused CEO, I can tell.
Yeah.
What's up? Hey, Gaurav. Thank you so much for the talk. One thing I'm curious to know about is what's kind of your thought process behind finding problems that are meaningful to you that also have high impact? So talking about Solugen, how did you know that Solugen, in your eyes, was kind of the problem to be solved? And what kind of advice would you give for finding problems that are meaningful towards people?
Yeah, I think, so for me, it does go back to my dad where so the whole story is I have a PhD in cancer biology. I was studying pancreatic cancer and discovered this really cool set of reactions in cancer that makes hydrogen peroxide, which in and of itself I thought was like scientifically cool, but I didn't think anything of it. But I was talking to my dad, who's a chemical industry veteran, and he's like, well, if you have a way to make peroxide that's easier, he used to design peroxide plants. He said, if you have a way to make it easier, that's going to blow open the whole entire market. And so that insight that he had, I think, helped me kind of internalize what was important to people, because basically what he was saying was, this is what customers care about. So what I would say is, again, going back to this customer-centric thing, talk to 100 customers. Seriously, like your intuition will develop very quickly on what's important to them after I don't know your market, but like, I'm sure there's probably 100 customers in your market. You could pick up the phone today and call, figure out what's important to them, and then your intuition will start rapidly accelerating into how they think about the world. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for the panel today. It was really exciting to watch. Probably one of my favorite panels thus far today. Robert, with a technology company in the Department of Defense, we're a team of 20, profitable. We're at that stage right now where there's this internal conversation of like, do we raise or do we not? Partially, we can see what's possible to run further faster, and two, there's matching government funds along if we bring in outside capital. What are the questions, like things that we should be thinking about, not only bringing outside funds, but bringing that outside pressure and possibility in?
May I ask a couple questions?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so where does your product play in the value chain of the Department of Defense?
So we run the Joint Innovation System for most of the branches.
And so does that mean you're bringing the Department of Defense innovative new technologies to look at and scout, or what does that mean?
So basically on any level they can bring in their ideas into the system and manage. Really, the purpose behind the system is bringing ideas to initiatives to actually acquisition inside
Got
the
it.
military faster.
And what is how do you make money?
We sell like enterprise licenses to the branches.
Got it. So you're selling like some type of services
Subscription. Yep.
subscription. You should raise money. So I think if I was in your shoes, there's like this movement happening. I'm sure you know the American Dynamism movement, where a lot of really top tier VCs are starting to appreciate just how precarious our defense infrastructure is to foreign adversaries. And I know this because we have contracts with the Department of Defense. We are in a lot of their bills. We were in the National Defense Authorization Act that just came out. I do a lot of work with this. The reality is that you could build as like a contractor and slowly gain access, but you're like this really unique time. So I think there's a timing element to this as well. I would say if this was 5 years ago or maybe even 10 years ago, maybe don't raise. But where we are today, and you know this better than I do, the geopolitical environment is kind of a mess, right? It's a hot mess express is what I'd call it, where it's like there's energy crisis, there's countries that want to kill each other, there's countries that are killing each other, like there's just a lot of things that are going wrong. And investors are starting to notice that. Yes, we want to appreciate that they're patriotic or whatever, but for your company now is probably a really good time to go raise a shit ton of money.
Awesome. All right, thank you.
Unbiased.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Great answer, hoping that you'll say something similar to me.
I don't know. Let's see.
Hi, I'm Landy Spearman. I'm the CEO and founder of Organize Shift. Some of our clients include Salesforce, even the Greater Houston Partnership, who's hosting this today. What we're in the process of doing is productizing our solution. And so right now we have an immersive multisensory leadership development and coaching product.
Yeah.
And we're productizing that. So if you
Got
think
it.
about Sims meets leaders,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
that I
I got
can
it,
learn
yeah.
how to do this faster. Question is very similar regarding raising funds and capital. What would you suggest in terms of, where do we start?
Yeah.
I love the comment that your colleague here has spoke to in terms of how you think about people and customers.
Yeah.
You're very, very intentional. So can you
Yeah.
also speak a little bit about how you develop your leadership team around you?
Yeah, I think I've done a poor job. I'll just be honest. I think I'm pretty open with this stuff. I think I've done a pretty poor job, and we're working with a lot of these coaches and like these programs because the raw intellectual horsepower is just amazing on this team. It's just making sure that everyone is rowing the same direction. That's a problem. The value of that to us now, I would say maybe 2 years ago, I wouldn't see much value to that. Where we are today, and I see where things can go off course, I would pay a lot of money for that, like a lot of money. And so I think when I look at your type of business, I look at companies, like my ideal customer profile would be a company that's just raised in the last 12 to 24 months, a Series C or Series D, who's ready for scale up. There's expectations for them to go public. Find those companies, figure out there's always going to be really hard friction in the executive team because you're coming out of like startup phase and into like scale up phase. Yeah. And that means that leadership becomes way more important for success. And so what I would say is like, if I were in your shoes, I would move to the Bay Area. I'd move to the Bay Area. Remember city product fit, right? So like I would move to the Bay Area where it's very clear where all the Series C and D startups are. There's a few of them, right? And then they all kind of talk, right? It's not just like, oh, I closed like Rippling. No, Rippling, Parker talks to me. I get Parker's coach. We hire that same coach. So it's like, where I would play is make sure you figure out who are the Series D companies, number one. Number two, figure out who they raised from. See if you can get them on your cap table or at least have a conversation with them. Then I would go to all of these Series C, Series D companies and figure out like, how big of a problem is this? The answer is it's going to be a huge problem. Make it easy for someone like me to say, push button, fix team. Obviously it's not that easy, but like you get the idea. Is like if you could productize that, that'd be worth a lot of money. Yeah.
Thank you. Just so you know, you put a plug into my husband who's here, who's the co-founder. So.
Oh, great.
You said the Bay Area, right?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Just letting you know. Thank you.
I'm sorry to your husband if he likes Texas. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for the questions. We're going to shift into what I call lightning round. We've got about a minute left, so I'm going to give you some rapid fire questions. So, the book every founder must read.
This is a weird book, but it's called The Luck Factor. It sounds like a scammy, skeezy book, but it's basically this idea of a luck surface area, where it's like any one of us can be quite lucky if we just focus on the things that lead to luck, which is like, I'm an introvert. I don't really like talking to people, but I forced myself when I was 18 or 19. I would go to coffee shops and I would ask them for a free coffee. It was the most painful experience of my life, right? I felt so like, shameful. I'm asking for a free coffee. But most of them said yes, right? And so this is what I mean, is like, you don't know how lucky you're gonna get until you put yourself in a position where you have to be lucky. And so The Luck Factor is a really simple read. You can read it in a day, and it's got really simple principles on how to, increase luck in your life.
Okay, I'm gonna add that to my reading list. Worst thing a founder can do when fundraising?
Lie. Never, ever lie.
I agree with that. And the person you'd like to have dinner with?
Oh, okay. Is time travel possible in this future?
Yes.
Yes, okay. All right, this is going to be a cheesy one, but I want to have dinner with my 2 daughters when they are in their 40s. So right now they're 3 years old and 1 year old. It would be so cool just to see like how did I do, like a feedback loop, right? Like how bad of a parent was I? Or how good of a parent was I? Or like what do they care about? I would love to have dinner with my girls when they're older and I'm gone. Yeah.
Oh, I love that answer. You're probably a very good girl dad. So thank you everyone for joining us today. And also thank you to the Greater Houston Partnership for hosting this. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.